Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Troubleshooting Lawson Security webinar. This was a webinar that a lot of people have been asking for, and I can only assume is because you're finally coming around to implementing Lawson Security, and that's a good thing. And what I wanted to do was really kind of try to focus on things that you probably don't know about. Let's hope we've done that in this webinar. So in 2014, in February, we did a poll when we did our security webinar, which is available on the web. When we did that, we did a poll, and 42% of you at that point were still using LAUA, 10% weren't really sure, I guess, and then 48% wanted Lawson Security. So it was kind of a 50-50 thing, which wasn't good, obviously, because you really should have been on Lawson Security several years before that. But today, from the people that are on the call, and this is just a poll that you answered when you registered, 20% of you are still on LAUA. That's a good improvement, half the number as before, but again, this is a move you have to make before you can move to version 10, and it can take you quite a bit of time if you want to do it right. So, and today we're not going to focus on the basics of security. Those are covered in our other webinars, but today we're going to get a little bit more advanced, and we're going to talk about some of the more advanced features. Let's see, of the audience today, this is the question you also answered as you registered for the webinar. We've got 53% intermediate from a skills security standpoint, and 40% beginner and 7% expert. And good to have those experts here, and I'd love to hear your questions and also hear you answer other people's questions at the end of the session. By the way, if you have questions, you can type them into the chat box in the bottom left corner of your screen at any time. I prefer you wait till the end because otherwise they kind of get jumbled with other messages that are coming through. And then of the attending audience, we have about 17% of you who are using the lsfiq tool right now. So jumping right into it, from a debugging standpoint, obviously the first thing we're all used to is just the log files that are sitting out there. And these are the log files that kind of have something to do at some level with security, kind of in the order that I think are important. I think the iOS and the LACE log files are probably the only ones that are really going to ever help you get to anything, but you know, you never know, you might find some information otherwise too. These log files, as you probably already know, reside inside your Lauder system folder on the server, and you should have access to those if you're going to be debugging security. So I don't know how well you can see this one, but I have a better screenshot in the next slide. So this is the iOS.log, actually. Okay, so I've zoomed in here a little bit. This is literally something that came up as I was putting this presentation together. I have a customer that had an issue, and they wanted to debug it, and this is the only way I could find out what was wrong. The user was going to PO30, but they had some issue, but they couldn't really figure out what the problem was. So this log shows me that the user has no L access. And what that means is that there's a function code L on PO30.1 that this user didn't have access to. And you wouldn't be able to get this information any other way. It would be pretty hard to debug this type of thing without this kind of a log. So I thought it made a good example. It was very timely, and it just happened like literally 2 or 3 days ago, so I put it back in here. As you know, your logging on the server can be changed, and this affects your LACE server log. You can go to the Security Administrator under the Server tab, under the Auditing and Logging tab, and you can turn on different types of logging. Now, on your production server, I don't recommend anything other than critical, maybe general. All might be too much because it really is too much. But if you're stuck on a problem in your development server where you're testing some new roles or your new classes or whatnot, you might want to turn debug on here, and that actually gives you a ton of information about what's going on. Personally, I never turn on debug because I feel like I get so much information in there that it gives me sometimes it's just too much information, and I can usually figure things out a little faster on my own. Using some other tools that we'll discuss. Although if you do get stuck in something and you just can't get out of it, there's probably no better way of finding out exactly what's going on. So one thing I use quite a bit is Fiddler. I know a lot of you probably have used Fiddler in the past, and it is a great tool for web debugging and performance testing, traffic recording, and really all kinds of testing of anything that's happening within your web browser session. And you can Fiddler, if you have used it for years, which a lot of you have, I'm sure, if you're on this call, you've got, this is a tool that's been around for a very long time. It was developed by a developer, and it recently, I think a couple of years ago, was acquired by a company called, or by a website, I'm not really sure, Telerik, and these guys have actually managed to keep it free, which is very nice of them. And they're still developing it, which is also very nice. There's some features that are now, I believe, paid features, but quite nice for what it does, and the fact that it's free is kind of unbelievable. So what does Fiddler do? For those of you who are not familiar, I'm not going to do a live demo of it because there's web traffic that's actually happening right now because I'm streaming this, and you would just see way too much stuff going on the screen. But really, what it does essentially is on the network level of your PC that you're working on, it can look at the traffic that's going on your network connection, and it can intercept that, and it can help you debug every little byte that's going through. And as you can see, I've highlighted a security violation message on my screen there, and that is basically the browser response that was received from the server, and I can actually go through and look at every single byte that came back, and that can really help me. And one of the things that can help me, couple of things that I use within Fiddler that I find helpful, that even if you've been using Fiddler, you may not know about. There's a process picker that looks like a little a set of crosshairs that you can grab and move to the browser session that you actually want to record the session for. Otherwise, you're seeing all of your network traffic. So, for example, if you've got an email client open, or if you've got a chat client open, or if you're watching stocks or whatever it is that you're doing, all of that traffic will be coming through Fiddler, and it really crowds your screen. But if you use that process picker and you pick the specific browser session, it can really help you kind of narrow down the traffic. The other thing I like to do is I like to right-click on the item that I'm interested in and mark it as red, so that I can it's highlighted for me. I can always go back to it. Then the other thing that I find a lot of people don't know about is you can actually set breakpoints within the quick exec bar. The quick exec bar is the little bar at the very bottom of the screen in Fiddler. It's almost like a little open field that you can type messages into. And the keyword that I like is BPU, which is a breakpoint directive. Once I put that in, I can say like BPU token HR11 or something like that, or I can just say BPU HR11. So what happens is when it sees the response from the server, and as soon as it sees that word that I've said break on, it actually breaks and waits on the response, and I can actually edit the response, and I can actually edit the request. I can do quite a bit of things with that breakpoint. So it's definitely one of those really nice to have options. Method 3. So JXplorer is one of many LDAP browsers that you can download, and you can download JXplorer for free from jxplorer.org. It is an LDAP browser and editor, and what that means is, if you're not familiar with LDAP, LDAP is the lightweight directory that basically houses all of your Lawson Security information, including information regarding users and including information regarding your security classes and roles and things like that. The thing with LDAP is it can seem very complicated because it uses terminology and nomenclature that are very unfamiliar to us anywhere else. Other than that, it's actually not a very complicated system. If you learn the terminology and the infrastructure, you can learn LDAP quite easily. In fact, you'll find that it's very trivial. It's just a set of directories nested within each other to hold different types of information. You can buy the enterprise version of this tool. I've never really needed the enterprise version. The free version's been fine for me, and it's open source. And it allows me to query and edit my LDAP tree. So this is kind of a view of one that I was looking at the other day. And really, on the left side, you can see there that it's kind of, you can keep opening this tree, and that structure, like for example, your users that you can see on your screen, you can expand that and you can see inside that. Now, the trouble with JXplorer that everybody has is every time they try to log into JXplorer, including myself, they get confused. What is the host? What is the port? What is the base DN? And what is my username and password for this thing? So I've made it really easy for you because it's taken me a while to learn how to get this done the best way. When I was first starting with JXplorer, it certainly was not easy for me to do that from client to client. And I figured out that all of the information that I need is inside my install.cfg file that resides in Lauder's system. So here, what I've done on this screenshot, and you guys will get access to this PowerPoint. I'll have this available on the site later for download, and we'll send you an email when it's available. So what I've done here is I've actually said, I've actually included the names of the fields within install.cfg that contain the information for logging into JXplorer. If you don't use that file, it may be a little difficult for you to do that because some of these things are not trivial and they're not obvious. Like your username, you might think that's just a simple username, but it isn't. It's actually the user DN, and you need to grab that really kind of verbatim from that install.cfg file unless you know it by heart. So it's easy for some of you because we've got 7% experts, but for those beginners, trust me, this screenshot will save you hours if you're trying to use JXplorer. So some tips for using JXplorer, not really tips, but things that it can do. You can see as you expand these trees, you see the attributes of all the objects. Depending on the part in the tree that you start, you only see downwards from there. So only start where you need to. You can't really start at the very top of your tree because of the limitation of the free version of JXplorer. It can only do so many queries at once. And if you're up at the very top of the tree, you can imagine you've got all of your user information, all of your role information, and all of your security information in one place in all the different profiles. So that's a lot of information for it to bring back. I would start at the part of the tree that, so you set your base DN at the part of the tree that kind of makes sense for what you're looking for. So you can export all this data into text files. I don't recommend modifying any of your LDAP information using any of these tools. In fact, I never do that. The only time it's acceptable to do that, I think, is when you're doing a fresh install and you just need to set some information up. But after that, there's really no need to be modifying things within LDAP Explorer or within sort of LDAP Dior or Explorer. The only reason I use this tool is because it helps me dig a little deeper into security information and kind of find out things that I may not otherwise see. So if you don't have access to JXplorer, you can download it, but let's say you just can't figure out how to use it or whatnot, there are other tools. But really quick, I want to go over these this JXplorer connection information again. These are on the left in bold. I've got the name of the field within your install.cfg, and I've kind of explained what those are. So we got your port, your base root directory, your host name, the username, and the password. And I'm pretty sure I've double checked all of this, so should be correct. So method 4, not the most useful thing in the world because it kind of can look like a bunch of gobbledygook, but you can do an LSdump, and LSdump you do from a command line in lid. I recommend being in lid when you do it as opposed to being on like a Windows command prompt, because you do need access to some paths that Lawson sets for you. You might have those set otherwise, but I'd say start in lid. It's a Lawson delivered utility that helps you export your security profile information into an XML file. And where it's really useful is because you can dump that security profile and then load it into another environment. So that's quite nice. And we use that all the time. But the other thing is you can actually open that XML file in a text editor and you know, search for things and read it. And you can even edit it there. Now, editing that isn't as bad as editing your LDAP through a tool like JXplorer. It's probably not as dangerous because you can always re-upload your LSdump file. But again, you may not find that very useful. I only find it useful if I want to kind of search and see, hey, in all of security, is there something that I'm looking for? And then that can quite quickly bring something back for me. I recommend using a modern text editor like Edit Plus or Notepad++, but if you want to edit and look at this file. And then this file, what's nice about it, like I said, it can be used in conjunction with a tool called LSload to migrate security from one environment to another. So the way that works, so the way LSdump works, it's a very simple command. I've put an example here on the screen. There are other parameters you can run with. This is probably the most common one, is to just dump the whole profile. Some of the flags on some versions of the environment in 901 anyway, and some subversions of 901, some of those flags don't work properly. So I can just tell you that. And the same goes for LSload, by the way. So LSload, very easy to use. So this is to load that profile back into another environment, or you can load that profile into another profile if you want to do some testing or whatnot. Again, extremely simple. This actually works really well. I rarely see this crash. I don't recommend doing this during high usage time on your server or even when it's being used at all, because you're kind of pulling the rug out from underneath security and putting it back in. So while this is happening, your users will experience some kind of weird security stuff going on. They'll lose their access for a while they gain it back. So you're basically yanking all the rules out and putting new rules back in. If you're doing it to a live profile, that is, sorry, if it's turned on and connected to a product line. I don't recommend doing that, obviously. Don't do it on a live profile that is being used. I'd always figure out ways around that, unless you want to kick all your users off or something. So there are other tools. This is one of my favorites. I use this ldfide. There's another one called csvde. These are Microsoft delivered utilities. They're probably installed on your server, may not be installed on your server. If they are not, I recommend having them there because one day you'll need them and you won't have them, and it will kind of takes time to install. Basically what these do, ldfide dumps out a text file, and then csvde, as you can guess, dumps out a CSV file. Believe it or not, I think the ldfide one is the most useful one, to me anyway, because I can use a script then to read that. Then you can, if you're good at writing Perl scripts and whatnot, you can do that pretty easily. This text file, you can just view it in a text editor. There's no editing that because you really can't do much with it after you've dumped it, but it's kind of nice to be able to search that file for different things that you're looking for. Like you can search for a user. How do you use this one? So this can be a little tricky to use. That's why I thought it would be nice to give you an example. Now, like I said, this presentation will be available later, and I will have this PowerPoint. So you can literally copy and paste that command more or less as you see it into your command prompt, and just change, the information that is from your, that relates to your server, like the LDAP server itself, the directory where you want the log file to be in, and the username and password that is going to connect to that LDAP instance. Other than that, the rest should work pretty well. I've named a bunch of fields here. You don't need to. If you don't name the fields, it just dumps everything out. I just like only certain fields, so I only use these fields when I run a query. And so what this does, guys, it basically dumps out a flat file that looks like this. So this is just from my user. When you dump out the whole thing, you basically get a chunk of text like this, exactly kind of like this, for every user in your system, okay? So one batch of this for every user in your system. And this is because, by the way, I started at a certain base DN, so that -G base DN, and you can see that at the bottom side of the actual example, I've got my my -D is OU resources. So that's my resources, meaning that's where I'm looking at actual resource information. And so you'd see a set of this in back to back. Now it says, do you have an example of the same command in the Unix system? I do. Thank you for asking. Now on Unix, you don't have ldfide, but you have LDAP search, and I will include that when I post the presentation up, but I don't have it here on the screen. I do have a really great example for you on how to run that command though. So let's go over what this gives you. It gives you the, that DN line, you don't have any control over whether or not you're gonna see that, by the way. That comes out every time. The username's there, the full name of my user, the portal role that I'm using, the groups that I'm a part of, and the roles that I'm a part of, plus my email and whatever else I asked it to spit out. So really, it's whatever it was in your query that you wanted to return. And you can get identity information also. That's a different query that if you're curious, just ask me and I can send it to you. So the next method is to just kind of use some reporting. Now, if you're familiar with Lawson Security reports, they are not great. I'm being nice. They can be quite cumbersome. There's third-party reporting solutions like lsfiq, and then there's some homebrewed reporting that people have done using LDI. Now, that can be a little bit cumbersome as well because LBI wasn't built to do reporting on LDAP information, so it can be kind of goofy, and I don't find the experience to be quite that pleasant. So really, here's an example of me in the Lawson Security trying to find out who's got access to RQ10. Okay, and somewhere in the middle there is a screen with a ton of user IDs on there, but not their names. And then I have to go back and find out who that person was. And really, it took 38 clicks as I counted, and it opened something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 windows or something like that. So that was not the most pleasant experience. And dealing with this every day can be kind of quite difficult. And people ask you this all the time. Who's got access to what, and how can I get access to other reports. So hopefully you can see my screen here. This is lsfiq, and some of the examples of things you can run in here, reports that you can run in here are, several dimensions of data that you can kind of explore. So one of the ones I like is this roles by token. And let's say I want to look for users in my system that have, roles in my system that have PO30 in it, because I may be asked to give access to PO30.1, but I don't really know what role would have that. So I can go ahead and generate report. And as you can see, it tells me all the roles and all the classes that would give access to PO30.1. And it tells me the kind of access it would give. And if I'm kind of curious, whether or not SC buyer role is in here, I can just use the search box at the top, and it kind of reduces it's more of a filter box, and it reduces the search down so I can be sure. The other thing I'm asked all the time is whether or not what tokens, what screens are inside a role. So got this report tokens by role here, and sometimes I want to assign a couple of roles to someone, and I want to make sure that they are not getting access to certain screens because I've given them those roles. Like for example, I've got these 2 roles that I'm going to look at, the HR inquiry role and the HRBN assist. So if I look here, I get basically all the screens that these 2 roles would give access to. There's 19 pages of this, obviously. There's 400 and such screens and rules. And I want to make sure that this doesn't give access to PA52, so I type that in. Sure enough, it doesn't. But I want to make sure it does give access to PA56, so that's there. And I also want to make sure it gives access to PR13. So that's good, but as you can see, the PR13 is really PR13.1, let's say, okay. So PR13.1, it looks like I don't really get anything other than inquiry access at all. So there's that, and then, you can just keep searching for screens. So on HR07.1, I have basically just inquiry access as well. And then the last thing that I use a lot is, I use all of these actually, tokens by user. So a lot of times I'm asked, if so-and-so has access to such and such screen. So if I just kind of come here and look for, I don't even need to know his ID, I can just search for him by name. So if I search for this guy by his name, or by his last name or by his ID, I can then come in here and say, he's got access to, every user gets access to tons of reports, obviously. So if I want to see, does he have access to HR11.1? And looks like he's got some conditional access to HR11.1, so that's good to know. But I want to make sure, since this guy is in HR, he doesn't have access to PO30, he doesn't. and he doesn't have access to like AP20, that he doesn't have access to that. And then the other thing I might want to find out is this BN-LOA role. I want to know like who else has access to this. So I can just click on that and kind of drill around, and it tells me what users have access to this. So these are the only users that have access to it, which is nice to know. And then for example, if I wanted to know who else has access to this screen, I can say users by token. So I can see that there's a lot of people that have access to DN180, and they have access to it through these roles and these classes, and they have all this access. So pretty much kind of takes all the headache out of doing anything with security reporting. And we use this tool all the time while we're doing our security implementations. Saves us hundreds of hours, really. And then I can run like an all users report as well. So, and what's nice about this is I can search on all these columns at the same time. So if I wanted to look for a John, who's a requester, you notice I've got Johnny, and he's a requester, and those were two different search terms in two different columns, and I was able to get him back. But the nicest part of this, guys, is I can for example, if I get go back to the tokens by user, I'll just spell my names correctly. I can just go ahead and export all of the information out to CSV and share that or filter on it and whatnot. So this helps us the most probably with any sort of security debugging, and it's definitely the kind of the quickest way I can get the information I need. So let's go back to our presentation. Okay, so last but not least, I'm talking about cache. Okay, so as you're developing things within security and you're debugging, you'll get very frustrated at times because things are supposed to work and they don't seem to be working. So there's a few different places where you have to clear out your cache. So one of the first things I would do is I would do an iOS cache refresh, and then I would also clear out the browser history, and I would clear out my security cache, okay? So the security cache can be cleared on the server tab in the security administrator. You just click that button that says clear cache. And really, guys, what that does is security, all these access rules are being cached, so they don't have to be looked up all the time. And that's nice, but you know, if you're trying to develop and you're trying to debug, and it can really hinder you because you may have changed something, but that caching is still in place because it doesn't get refreshed that often. You know, typically people set that at 900 seconds, which is 15 minutes. So I would say if you're in a development mode where you're actually creating lots of new security classes and rules and things like that, I would reduce that caching interval to a much lower setting, like 15 seconds, so that you can get quick updates. But yeah, in your production server, 900 is probably perfect. And then last but not least, I would try things a lid to kind of make sure that's not the problem. This is where you reduce that caching interval. It's under the server tab, so right there is, I've set it to 15, as you can see. I also find this is a good way to really clear the cache, because that button right above it says clear cache, but sometimes it doesn't seem to work. So what I do is I come in here, and let's say it's set to 900, I'll change it to like 899 and hit apply. And that actually seems to work a little bit better than clearing the cache. So there you go. That's another one for you. The other thing I recommend that really helps you debug better is if you, your naming convention really needs to kind of be set so that as you're debugging, you understand what the different pieces of this are. That can be pretty difficult to get right. I personally, over the years, I find it's best to, if you're creating a new role, this is kind of, it may not seem intuitive, but I add the word role, like R-O-L-E, at the end of every role name now, because as you can see on my, well, actually it's not on your screen anymore, but in lsfiq you can see it. All the roles have the word role at the end of it, like ESS role or HR Corp Health role or, you know, AP accounts role or whatever. That may seem intuitive to just not put that there because you should know what your roles are, but after a while looking at this information, it can get a little cumbersome to kind of look at a role and decide whether or not it's a role. Now, you don't have to do that with classes as well. Like usually I put CLS at the end of some class names if there's fully custom classes. But that naming convention helps me. The other thing is I like starting all my class names with the system code that they come from. So like BN, you know, clerk, or BN like processing class or something like that, or BN reports or AP close or whatever it is, the different classes that you create. I like starting it with the system code because it helps me kind of categorize them and find things a little easier. So the other classes that we have had are all available. All the webinars are at nogales.com/education. Definitely recommend you guys check that out. Tons of great webinars we've had over the years, including other ones on Lawson Security. I think we have like 2 or 3 other ones on Lawson Security. They're all free, no sign up or anything necessary. You just go and you can download them and you can view the video recording online. If you have new suggestions for other topics you'd like to see, and I'm already kind of seeing some potential topics come up on the in the chat box here, go ahead and suggest those in that same page. There's a little form you can suggest new webinars, and we try to do our best to get those done within a month of your suggestions. So please go ahead and just whatever you want there. Upcoming webinars and events, we're going to be at MWLUG, the user group on August 19th, and we'll have a great session there. And then on August 27th, we're doing 11 performance enhancers for your Lawson environment. This is a really good one, guys. We actually did this year at the local user group, and a lot of the people that were at the user group chimed in some great ideas, and we've actually got way more than 11 in this presentation. So I really recommend signing up for that. It's on August 27th. So just go to the nogales.com/education page. There's a link there where you can sign up. And some of you had some issues signing up for any meeting, and I've talked to them since then, and they've resolved those issues with ID9. You should be okay now. So like I said, that 11 performance enhancers one, you won't regret being on that, because if you've got any sort of, kind of lag times, or if your LSF environment has been slow or whatever it is, there's tons of great suggestions that have come from users, from consultants, from our experience that we compiled into one webinar, and we'd love to share that with you. Let's see. Okay, it's that time for Q&A, and I know there's tons of questions that have come up already, so I'm going to go back and see from the beginning here. Someone asked if user 12 was a hidden user. I've actually masked some of this information, guys, so what was on the screen was not really, I literally copied and pasted it and changed the username for anonymity, because this is actual data that I'm trying to give you good examples from. So let's see here. You will, like I said, you will receive a copy of this presentation, and it will be posted on our site by next week, by early next week. But we'll send you a quick email to let you know that it's available then. Does Fiddler work with LTM Ridge Client? Fiddler works with any network traffic that's going in and out of your machine that you're on. Now, I don't know if you can pinpoint the client or not, but there is probably a way, okay? So, I mean, I've never seen anything that I can't debug with Fiddler from a web traffic perspective. How can you automate group addition to Lawson Security? Let me take that one and group additions. So mass group addition. That's a good one. I don't know if it's possible, but I'm gonna look back through. I've got a big document that I wrote several years ago on Lawson Security, and I want to go back and see if I came up with something there. There's probably something that you can do. The command to use with Unix, so like I said, I will post LDAP search. I will actually edit the PowerPoint file, and I'll include the LDAP search example in there before I upload it up. And I'll do that today. Well, I'll do the edit today, but the upload may not happen today because we like to upload the presentation and the video together, so that takes a couple of days. Just out of curiosity, do you have a better process than manual load of new users into security? I uploaded security in the Ridge client, but the change did not take place. How to update LSA and then clear server cache? Is there option of a Ridge client to force or update changes? So, okay, so this particular webinar was really meant for LSF security, guys. I'm planning to do another one for Landmark security, and loading users can be a little trickier. But yeah, I mean, to load users in general into Lawson Security, and if you've got all the things worked out correctly, it should all work. We use the load users tool that Lawson provides, and one of the things that I didn't show you is I can kind of take you here right now real quick. We've got in LSFIQ, you can just go ahead and create an export load users, and you can export all of your users from the system into an export load users file, and it looks like that. Okay, so this typically takes like hours and hours to create this file, and you saw how long it took me to create it. It's just one click away, and it's done. You can then load this into your system. And we've got several different versions of this. You can actually modify this stuff and load new users in and whatnot. You can feed into it. Or you can just write a quick script yourself. It's really not that difficult to do, but it does require some sort of scripting to do that. So back to this. So if Landmark and LSF environments are federated, is Landmark and are they federated? So in the system that I've taken screenshots on, they are not, but really I can't think of much of a difference there. Then it says, if so, then you should be using ISS for creating and modifying user security. Okay, I see. You're answering another question there. Great. Okay, so there's the answer. Okay, so there's a conversation going on there. Not really any questions. Okay. So as far as LSFIQ, you can, so that Keith, as far as LSFIQ goes, you can, on our website, you can get a 30-day demo to that. It's on the front page. You can just click the request 30-day trial, and you get a 30-day trial that's full-featured. I think the only restriction on it is the export button only exports like 100 rows or something like that. But other than that, it's all full-featured, and you can get access to it. And if you're interested in the subscription, you just kind of let us know, and we'll send you pricing depending on your user counts and whatnot. So Glenn, any recommendation if deleting users better meets our needs versus disabling them? I'm not sure if that might have been part of the conversation, but just on a side note, deleting users can also be done using that load users utility. That's kind of the quickest way of doing it, and it's actually quite easy to put that file together because it's really just a column of users that you can feed it. But I think that was actually part of the conversation you guys were having. So the question, Roy, you were saying that the iOS.log is replaced too quickly. Can you cover anything regarding getting what you need out of the iOS log? Typically, you're right. It is cycled pretty quickly. You can actually change those cycles, and you can keep more of those files, I believe. Typically, I'm on top of the problem as they've had it in a pretty recent, like the past 10 minutes or so, and I can go through at least maybe one of the recycled logs. If you've got tons and tons of traffic, that may not work for you. So I have had to write a script before that takes every time a iOS.log is recycled, it actually takes the recycled version and puts it in an archive directory for like 10 hours or something like that, so I can always go back to it. So I hope that helps. So any other questions, guys? It looks like I kind of hit bottom. If I skipped anything, please go ahead and ask again, because some of this conversation, as interesting as it is, doesn't really contain any questions, I don't think. Or if it does, I may have missed it. So please, if there's any questions, let me know. We still have a few minutes. Do we have any training that can discuss separation of duties? We actually haven't done anything like that, but that's a good one. It's definitely easy to cover. Separation of duties, we actually do that within LSFIQ now, and you kind of need a tool for it. There isn't anything you can really do within Lawson Security that, unless you've got some magic spreadsheet that can help you kind of figure that out. It's really difficult without a good reporting and tool to do that. And that's really kind of one of the reasons why we started down the path with LSFIQ to begin with, was to kind of create that sort of separation of duties report. But we can definitely, I'll write that down as a suggestion for a webinar and see if there's something we can do outside of using a tool that can help you with separation of duties. One of the things that we do use, guys, and I can make this available to you, we use a spreadsheet that we've kind of been using over the years, and the format of it is just really great for designing and coming up with security classes, rules and roles, and how to relate those to users. If you guys are interested in that, let me know, and I can always post that or email it to you or whatnot. So I find that, we've done to date, I think we've done 85 or 86 security implementations, and this is the same spreadsheet we use all the time. So it's been improved over the years, but really in the past couple of years, we basically use the same thing. So I really like it. So you're interested in deleting versus disabling users. As far as approach goes, I can't really think of any reason you can't just delete a user out of security. Approach-wise, if you're just deleting one user at a time, there's, if that user is not going to be in the organization anymore, there's no reason to just not, you can just delete them out of security. So maybe, if I don't understand the question, I'm sorry, you can maybe tell me what the concern is, and then maybe I can address that. How long does it take for LSFIQ refresh its information, or is it instant? How does LSFIQ handle security fields on a form? Can you query that? I'll answer the second question first. Yes, you can do field security on a form. And then as far as refresh as often as you like. So you can automate the refresh. We recommend like a nightly if you're in a kind of a really like things that are changing quite a bit. But if they're not, we've got customers that are doing it. It's customers online right now that are doing it, weekly, or some that are doing it monthly even. When things don't change that much. So, but it's really good for them to kind of be able to just do any sort of reporting. And what's nice is all those instances in time kind of get frozen within LSFIQ, so you can always go back in time and say, hey, what did Tan have access to back in Q3 of 2014? So you can have access to that. So yes, okay. So I will include the spreadsheet. I'll put a link to the spreadsheet on that same presentation page. Disable. Lawson Infor states to disable for audit purposes, but we also like to delete the users. Keep the data clean. Oh yeah, okay. So I'm sorry, Glenn. I understand now. So you're saying, should I be deleting users or just disabling them because of audit purposes? Really, you should check with your audit team. Also, this is, like I said, like for example, within LSFIQ, we've got those users basically archived forever until you want to delete them out of LSFIQ. So you can go ahead and delete them, for example, out of your Lawson system. But if you don't have an archival system and you need to keep track of your users, maybe you want to keep them in there. But I don't understand really what is the useful information. Their username, that's not useful because, once those security logs have recycled and now you've removed their access, there's no trace of what was there before. So I don't understand really why anybody would recommend keeping that user there. That might even cost you money, right? Because you've got licensing that you have to pay per user to, depending on the application that you've got in there. So my personal thing, and I'm an IT guy, so my personal thing would be, let's delete it. But you have to check with your audit people, I suppose. But make sure they understand there's really no advantage of keeping a user around once all the data that, all the security data from them has been kind of removed, unless you're leaving the roles and things like that intact as well, and you're just, basically disabling it. But then again, so that information can be changed over time. So as long as you archive the information in some format, there's no reason to keep it inside security. I hate that because typically I'll go to a client and it's got like 30,000 users in there. And then I find out they only have like 14,000 active employees. And, what are these other 16,000 users doing in here? Well, I'll tell you what they're doing. They're cluttering up security. They're making an absolute mess of everything. Like, for example, one of the biggest things is, for me, if those roles are still assigned to users, I can't go clean up those roles. I can't go delete them because it won't let me. And now I got to go take them off of those users in order to just delete a role that who needs that role around anymore anyway? It's been 6 years since that role hasn't even been assigned to anybody. So no, my personal thing would be, let's get rid of it. But again, there might be a legal issue where you may not want to. Roy makes a point with some of the records that may be in some workflow tables, maybe. Yeah, you might want to look at those, but really, if you're doing this like a month after the user been out of the system, there really shouldn't be so you might want to set a policy, but if you've got records in there after a month of, inactivity from a user, then there's something else probably wrong from a process standpoint. As far as, so I see that information there, the chat there, as far as a process to automate adding and removing users. Guys, you can do all of that with process flow quite easily. I believe we have a webinar somewhere out there for that, and if not, let me know and I can post it. That information, that as far as being able to automate the adding and removing of users, that's not a lot of work. We've done that for dozens of customers, and it's been working pretty well. And as far as creating unique IDs, we actually have some PowerShell scripts for that as well. So let's see. Okay, so I don't see any other questions in here. Did I miss something? Please let me know. Okay, great. Well, thanks, guys. Thank you for attending. Really appreciate it. Don't forget to sign up for the other webinar. If you're going to be in the Midwest region, please go ahead and attend the MW Lug next week, and we look forward to seeing you there. We hope you can attend our session there as well. And any feedback or anything like that, go ahead and email me, tan@nogales.com. I'd love to stay in touch. And again, suggestions for webinars on our education page. I'll post this and we'll send you a quick email when it's up. Thanks again. Bye-bye.